Imagine being taken inside a classified facility, not as a scientist, but as a witness, and told you could never speak of what you saw. That is the position Grant Cameron describes, and for years his account was dismissed as fantasy. But today, reality looks different. Between May 2023 and June 2024, AARO logged 757 new UAP cases, bringing the total close to 1,652 by late 2024. Some of those cases, including 21 flagged for deeper investigation, echo details Cameron once shared. In this video, we'll break down those gaps, what parts of his testimony were vague, what recent disclosures help fill them, and what still doesn't add up. And to understand how his story went from ridicule to recognition, we need to start with how unbelievable it all sounded at first. From dismissed claims to documented cases, Grant Cameron's account first met public silence, followed by skepticism. When he spoke of being shown advanced technology inside a classified facility, few believed him. His words carried the mark of conspiracy, and even within UFO research communities, his testimony was set aside as unverifiable. For years, people treated his story as one more outlier in a fringe subject that lacked serious proof. That began to change as key events unfolded in mainstream arenas. The timeline is clear enough now. In 2017, major outlets reported on secret Pentagon programs studying unidentified aerial phenomena. In 2020, the Department of Defense released the now famous FLIR videos, captured by U.S. Navy pilots, and in 2021 officially confirmed their authenticity. Then in 2022, the Department of Defense created AARO, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, tasked with systematically tracking and analyzing UAP encounters. By 2024, the National Defense Authorization Act instructed the National Archives to establish the UAP Records Collection, Record Group 615, forcing interagency transfers of historic files that had never before been consolidated. Each of these steps marked a structural shift, moving UAP from rumor into official record. Numbers also began to pile up. Between May 2023 and June 2024, AARO logged 757 new UAP cases, adding to a total of about 1,652 incidents as of November 2024. Of those, 21 cases were flagged for deeper analysis because of unusual flight behavior or strong sensor data. These are not casual lights in the sky. They include object tracking on radar, corroboration by multiple sensors, and encounters with trained military observers. That scale of reporting is what places older accounts like Cameron's in a new frame. He's not being validated outright, but his descriptions now sit alongside a growing body of records that show oddly similar characteristics. That institutional shift is why earlier testimonies, once dismissed, are now re-examined against credible data rather than tossed aside. The weight of the comparison lies in detail. Cameron spoke of structured craft lacking any familiar features of propulsion. AARO reports describe objects maneuvering without visible control surfaces, performing sharp accelerations, and producing signatures inconsistent with conventional aircraft. Encounter logs list speeds and angles of movement that no known technology can replicate. It is the echo between private testimony and systematically documented events that changes the calculation. What once seemed like exaggerated storytelling now overlaps with case files logged under military command. This does not mean his story is treated as proof. It exists in tension with official language. Cameron recalls secrecy, intimidation, and vague briefings, while government reports describe anomalous behaviors in technical terms without attaching larger conclusions. The overlap is not perfect, but it is strong enough to make coincidence seem less likely. The contrast sharpens the debate. Did witnesses like Cameron imagine details that later aligned by chance, or were they telling fragments of a truth institutions only acknowledged decades later? For Cameron, the transformation in environment is striking. When he first spoke publicly, bringing up UFOs in policy discussions was enough to harm a career. After 2017, senators demanded briefings, hearings were held in Congress, and mainstream science began to discuss UAP cases openly. The discussion no longer thrived only in magazines or late-night talk shows. It spread into legislation, military task forces, and archival requirements. Within that atmosphere, witness accounts once confined to the margins suddenly carried more weight, not because they had changed, but because authority stopped pretending the subject did not exist. Public perception evolved just as rapidly. When trained fighter pilots describe pursuing objects that evade interception, dismissive laughter grows thinner. When congressional law requires federal agencies to transfer classified UAP records into an official archive, it becomes harder to argue that the issue is pure imagination. Hundreds of newly documented cases suggest a sustained pattern, not random noise. And with every release of confirmed data, older witness stories gain renewed attention. What once belonged to folklore now begins to read as early documentation of a broader phenomenon. Cameron himself stands inside that shift. Where critics once silenced him, analysts now revisit his testimony with fresh eyes. If his account sounded isolated before, it now sits on a timeline already populated by Senate hearings, AARO reports, and archive directives. That makes it less about the credibility of a single voice and more about whether his claims foreshadowed patterns the government now admits to observing. The significance extends beyond one man. As testimony and institutional record continue to align, the act of witness itself changes value. Discarded stories become part of a larger puzzle. Even details once brushed aside, like how objects turned sharply without slowing, now appear in official assessments. The stigma weakens while the demand for closer scrutiny grows. By the end of 2024, the evidence landscape is clear. Cameron's words live in a different era than when he first spoke them. He does not stand alone as the voice of the extraordinary. His recollections now resonate against documented events, logged data, and mandated archives. With every release of information, his account moves further out of speculation and closer into comparative evidence territory. That brings the focus back to the testimony itself, what he claimed to see, how it was presented, and what specific elements were blurred or missing. It's in that direct account, the moment he says he was brought into secrecy and shown technology beyond human design, where the most pressing questions remain. Inside the testimony, the Area 51 visit. Grant Cameron later described what happened at Area 51 as one of the most disorienting nights of his life. He says he wasn't simply handed reports or briefed with vague claims about secret programs. He was physically taken into a guarded installation that he quickly realized was not a routine hangar. From the outset, the environment was layered with control. Cameron recalls guards at every point, his identity checked again and again, and the sense that every step was orchestrated. Before being shown anything, he says he was required to sign legal documents that emphasized silence above all else. Beyond an ordinary confidentiality agreement, these forms threatened severe consequences for disclosure. The warnings did not end with paperwork. Cameron remembers repeated verbal reminders of penalties, a barrage of pressure designed to intimidate. Researchers have noted that such legal compulsion mirrors practices seen during the Cold War, when access to highly classified programs often included immediate non-disclosure agreements and threats of prosecution. In Cameron's telling, this level of formality set the stage and made clear that what followed was never meant to be openly discussed. He describes the interior of the facility as functionally austere, white corridors, fluorescent lighting, and a lack of windows. Personnel moved past him without acknowledgement. Every door required clearance, often with multiple badges or codes, and at no point was he left unescorted. Cameron emphasizes the detail that he was watched constantly, saying an armed guard once stood directly behind him as he entered the chamber where the craft was kept. The entire process, he recalls, carried the weight of compartmentalization, strict separation of roles and knowledge that left him as both participant and outsider, always under scrutiny. The central point of his testimony is what he says was revealed inside that chamber. According to Cameron, what stood before him was a craft unlike any conventional aerospace design he had encountered in his own research. He recalls its appearance as seamless, without panels, rivets, or bolts, nothing resembling standard aeronautical construction. He says the surface looked as though it had been manufactured from a single material, with smooth curves that defied classification. In his later accounts, he gave a rough estimate of about 50 feet in diameter, though he admitted that measurement was based only on personal impression rather than precise observation. He described the object's overall profile as circular but slightly elongated, noting a flattened, low structure that did not seem designed to cut through Earth's atmosphere in the usual way known aircraft are designed to function. Cameron's description did not stay consistent over time. In his earliest interviews, the details were vague. He said only that he had been shown a craft and left it at that. Critics argued that his evasiveness undercut his credibility, while supporters pointed to the pressures of secrecy as enough explanation. In later years, as the climate around UAP testimony shifted, he added more description. He says the craft's exterior reflected light in an unfamiliar manner, not like materials such as aluminum or steel. He recalls the interior as especially unusual, floors that curved upward into walls, panels merging seamlessly, and a lack of recognizable controls. Where a cockpit might typically have visible seats, levers, or display surfaces, he says there was nothing of the sort. This absence of controls suggested to him that the craft had not been designed with human ergonomics in mind. It is important to note that no imagery, artifacts, or technical documents have been released publicly that corroborate these specific interior descriptions. Researchers point out, however, that Cameron's claims about seamless construction and lack of visible propulsion are broadly similar to language found in modern military reports. Both AARO and NASA have described unconventional shapes and sightings of objects without conventional flight surfaces. Pilots in recorded testimonies have noted sharp movements or hovering without wings, tails, or engines visible. These parallels do not prove Cameron's account, but they place some of his broader observations in the same thematic category as other UAP case files now part of official records. Why the details emerged slowly remains a central question. Cameron often explained that withholding precision was his only protective strategy. The intimidation he recalled, stacks of legal documents, repeated warnings, constant surveillance, meant vague disclosure was safer than clear explanation. Ambiguity could communicate that something extraordinary had happened without directly violating agreements. Later, when government bodies began publishing reports acknowledging hundreds of unidentified encounters, Cameron felt more secure filling in missing parts of his memory. From his perspective, climate change and policy gave room to elaborate on what had previously been dangerous to articulate. Some analysts interpret this staggered disclosure as natural under pressure. Others view the late addition of details, like the hull dimensions and curved interiors, as suspicious enhancements used to align with modern narratives. The lack of direct external corroboration continues to divide interpretations. Was this truly a reluctant witness slowly revealing truth, or was it a storyteller adjusting his narrative over time? The answer depends largely on how one weighs the cultural environment of secrecy against inconsistencies in recollection. Cameron also emphasized the surrounding security procedures. He said he was escorted at every turn, doors opened for him rather than by him, and no corridor was left unmonitored. Personnel acted as though proximity itself carried risk, and his time with the craft was both controlled and brief. He says the guards' behavior suggested the content of the facility was extraordinarily sensitive. This level of compartmentalization echoes other testimonies of restricted programs, where individuals are granted temporary access but remain closely observed, isolated from wider context, and able to leave only with tightly managed impressions. What gives Cameron's narrative its weight is not the certainty of evidence. There are no released photographs or official logs tying him to that chamber, but the structure of how he describes the experience. The secrecy agreements, continuous escort, and lack of casual acknowledgement fit patterns known from earlier defense practices. Meanwhile, the anomalous qualities of the craft, as he recalls them, overlap with general descriptors found in later AARO case summaries: objects without visible propulsion systems, unusual proportions, and unconventional shapes. His testimony occupies a contested space where intimidation, recollection, and possible corroboration all intersect. As the story evolved through retelling, the combination of institutional secrecy and personal risk left a narrative half-formed, open to interpretation. Supporters argue that the vague-to-detailed progression reflects natural caution under legally binding silence. Skeptics call it a warning sign of retrospective embellishment. Either way, Cameron's Area 51 account highlights the difficulty of piecing together what witnesses claim to have seen inside classified settings. The absence of external confirmation does not erase the testimony, but it keeps it confined to the realm of narrative rather than established fact. And this is why the description of the craft itself becomes so pivotal. Beyond security environments and intimidation tactics, the heart of Cameron's story rests in the technology he says he was shown. It is here where the most pressing debate lies, not in his treatment by guards or the paperwork he signed, but in the features of the object itself and whether they align with anything now visible in advanced aerospace research. The missing craft descriptions. When Cameron expanded on what he said he witnessed inside the facility, the persistent question became, what were the specific details of that craft and how do they compare to what investigators are now documenting? He reported noticing features that stood out not for flash or spectacle, but for their absence: no seams, no rivets, no visible propulsion points. These details, at first glance, may seem too technical to matter. Yet they are striking when considered alongside modern assessments, especially when AARO and NASA reports describe certain cases showing no obvious propulsion despite dramatic movements. Cameron emphasized that the surface looked unnaturally smooth to his eye, as if it had been created in a single sweep rather than assembled from parts. He described it as lacking joints, bolts, or welds that are unavoidable in any known airframe. To him, this suggested a form of manufacturing unlike anything he was familiar with. He did not present this as laboratory evidence, there was none, but as a visual impression that was simple and memorable. In a context where military summaries now refer to objects with unconventional movement characteristics, it is difficult to ignore the resonance. What he described decades ago, however tentatively, lines up with witness reports now backed by sensor records. Still, no publicly available laboratory analysis verifies any material of this type, and that remains an important limitation to keep in mind. Another detail he recalled was the lack of any recognizable engine system. There were no intakes, exhausts, or ports, all the features that even stealth aircraft retain in hidden form. Cameron could not say what did power the craft, only that the absence stood out. At the time this sounded outlandish, but today it aligns with a repeated theme in official documents: objects that accelerate or hover without exhaust heat, vapor trails, or sonic booms. AARO has highlighted this issue clearly, singling out 21 cases for further analysis because they displayed anomalous flight characteristics that conventional propulsion cannot easily explain. NASA, in its 2024 reports, went further by concluding that certain sensor returns remain unexplained. Cameron's sketchy recollection now fits that established pattern far more than he could have known then. He also said he noticed how light interacted with the surface in an unusual way. Instead of scattering broadly, the reflection seemed controlled and even. He did not have the vocabulary or technical framework to categorize it, but the impression stayed with him. Rather than suggesting exotic alloys directly, it is fairer to describe what he saw as suggestive of unfamiliar engineering approaches. And again, no evidence has ever been released to back his perception. These qualities remain within the space of testimony, rather than verifiable laboratory findings. Skeptics argue that such claims may simply reflect the imagination at work under stress, details selected to sound mysterious without offering verifiable substance. Yet the effort to reduce the account to fantasy becomes harder to sustain when government-released data describe nearly identical anomalies. This is where the weight of comparison lies, not in extraordinary speculation, but in seeing how small, seemingly minor observations echo language from official case files. Unequivocal proof is absent, but a meaningful overlap exists nonetheless. What may be even more telling is how spare Cameron's focus actually was. He avoided embellishment and instead highlighted the ordinary technical markers: joints, rivets, control panels, visible engines. To an engineer or a pilot, these would matter more than dramatic light shows. His insistence that the craft lacked controls or ergonomics for human pilots is especially resonant now, in an era where AI and autonomous drones form the cutting edge of testing. In the late 20th century, the suggestion of a control-free interior sounded unbelievable. Today, concepts of vehicles without human input are no longer hard to imagine, though still not at the scale of the craft he claims to have witnessed. Linking witness impressions to current science requires restraint. No one has demonstrated that Cameron stepped inside a craft later cataloged by AARO or NASA. At the same time, it is also difficult to ignore the consistency. Contemporary investigations report unusual maneuverability, lack of identifiable propulsion, and craft-like objects moving without the emissions conventional vehicles require. Cameron's account, drawn from memory, noted those same absences decades beforehand. The convergence does not resolve the question of origin, but it does close the gap between dismissed testimony and documented anomaly. The larger implication forces a narrow and uncomfortable question. If the craft was seamless and engine-free, he might have been placed in front of a very advanced prototype designed to look alien, or he may have genuinely encountered something that engineering still struggles to reconcile. These explanations remain unresolved, yet the fact that his testimony and modern data rest on the same descriptive features demands acknowledgement. For the public, the parallel creates a choice in how to interpret witness testimony. If simple, technical observations about rivets and engines resurface in government files half a century later, perhaps they should not be ignored no matter the source. The idea that someone noticed specific design markers that modern science also finds unexplained calls for more cautious reading than outright dismissal. At the same time, without physical corroboration, the account remains exactly that, one man's memory. Skepticism must always balance the echoes against the absence of hard proof. And so the craft Cameron recounted continues to invite puzzlement. Was it an impossible machine, a sophisticated black project shielded from public eyes, or simply his mind, pressured by circumstance, forming impressions that happen to align later? The details can be read in each of those ways, and no definitive closure has been reached. What is certain is that the overlap has grown stronger with time, and that grants his testimony a weight it never carried before. So while the missing craft descriptions present one of the most technically fascinating threads in his account, they are far from the only mystery. Within his testimony lies another element that has long baffled researchers, this time not about engineering, but about history itself. A claim involving one of the most recognizable scientists in the 20th century remains the most difficult part of his story to reconcile, and raises entirely different questions about what may have been recorded and forgotten in official archives. Einstein and the timeline mystery. Of all the elements in Cameron's testimony, the one that generates the most debate is his mention of Albert Einstein. Cameron relays an anecdote, often attributed in the past to broadcaster Frank Edwards, that Einstein once advised an American president not to provoke unidentified craft. The claim suggests Einstein warned that any civilization capable of interstellar travel would possess overwhelming capabilities, making aggression both futile and dangerous. While the story is striking, it contains an immediate problem. No primary archival record supports it. Searches in presidential libraries have uncovered no memo, no diary entry, no official correspondence linking Einstein to extraterrestrial warnings. That absence forces the account into a difficult category, folklore often repeated, but not historically verified. The limits of the timeline sharpen the problem. Einstein died in 1955, which confines any such exchange between 1947, when modern UFO discourse began, in the mid-1950s. That window coincides with a period of heavy press coverage of UFO sightings, especially the famous 1952 Washington, D.C. overflights, when radar operators, pilots, and citizens all reported unknown objects above the Capitol. Press clippings from that time mention telegrams sent to the White House urging the administration to tread carefully. Edwards, a popular broadcaster of the era, claimed Einstein himself was among those who voiced caution. Yet when scholars review the Truman and Eisenhower libraries, the material that surfaces is sparse. A few telegrams from the public, some Robertson panel references, and little else. Out of millions of pages, there is no direct evidence of an Einstein intervention. This gap is crucial to note. On one level, it leaves Cameron vulnerable. By attaching Einstein's name to his claims, he invokes science's greatest authority but risks anchoring his story to a figure absent from the record. Critics argue that a warning of such magnitude, if ever given directly to a president, would almost certainly have left some footprint, whether a diary remark, a note in an aide's schedule, or a line in a memorandum. None have been found. On another level, though, the anecdote endures because it fits the cultural context. The early 1950s were saturated with headlines about saucers, fueled by Cold War anxieties. The idea that Einstein, a cautious voice on nuclear policy, might extend his concern to spacefaring visitors carried intuitive appeal, even if hard evidence never followed. This persistence raises the question, why did Cameron integrate the story at all? His earlier testimony described secrecy and intimidation, themes grounded in his own experiences. Yet invoking Einstein broadened the frame, suggesting that the same caution he described had once been recognized by the most famous physicist of the century. For audiences, the association lent weight. If Einstein supposedly urged restraint, Cameron's call for credibility seemed less isolated. But the tactic also backfires. Scholars see the lack of supporting record and respond by labeling the entire anecdote as unreliable. In their eyes, one shaky element can diminish the credibility of the whole narrative. From the standpoint of archival evidence, the story has always been tenuous. Presidential collections from Truman and Eisenhower have been searched extensively for UFO-related material. The results are underwhelming. Scattered mentions of flying saucers and telegrams, discussions of the Robertson panel in 1953, and general public correspondence reflecting the period's anxiety. What is missing is any trace of direct consultation with Einstein about extraterrestrials. That silence does not prove he was uninvolved. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, but it firmly prevents the anecdote from being presented as fact. The most that can be said is that rumors of such input circulated in the mid-20th century, amplified by figures like Edwards, and later repeated by Cameron as part of a broader cautionary narrative. The question then becomes how to interpret these kinds of stories. Treating them as cultural markers rather than factual proof may be the most responsible approach. They reflect how, at the time, the public imagined science intersecting with mystery. Einstein symbolized caution born of deep understanding. If saucers seemed threatening, invoking his name gave advocacy for restraint a resonance unmatched by others. Cameron may have drawn on this tradition not to mislead, but because the story, however fragile, felt aligned with the warnings he felt compelled to share from his own experience. That said, clarity is critical. Viewers today deserve an accurate frame. Einstein did consult with presidents, but in contexts tied to nuclear weapons, science policy, and civil liberties, not documented extraterrestrial encounters. His verified writings show concern for peace, suspicion of militarism, and an aversion to escalating conflict. These values could be stretched into the position Cameron attributes to him, but such stretching must be acknowledged as interpretation, not evidence. Without corroboration in archives, the Einstein anecdote should be handled as unverified lore that reflects cultural attitudes of its era rather than an established historical exchange. The broader significance of this conclusion lies in what it teaches about the challenge of separating record from rumor. The persistence of anecdotal claims highlights how much of UFO history exists in a liminal space, combining partial documentation with oral testimony and media amplification. The Einstein story is emblematic. It is repeated, recycled, and culturally powerful, but unsupported by the documents researchers depend on for verification. In that sense, it stands as both a cautionary note for witnesses and a case study in how official silence leaves room for myths to flourish. By 2025, that tension remains unresolved. FOIA requests and targeted archival searches continue to probe mid-century presidential collections for any overlooked notes, but the yield is modest. Eisenhower's library, for instance, holds only a handful of relevant results among millions of pages. Truman's files offer public telegrams and memos acknowledging public concern, but nothing resembling a direct exchange with Einstein. These findings have sharpened the point. Presidential archives do contain UAP-related material, but far less than popular expectation. And nothing discovered has yet confirmed the specific anecdote Cameron chose to share. For researchers, this outcome forces a shift in emphasis. Instead of waiting for proof of Einstein's personal involvement, the focus narrows to what is documented. Presidents did receive pressure from the public on UFO issues.